What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about Cha-ching! Vampire Hunter D by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Guys, fuck yes is all I want to say, but of course I got to say some more. This is a review. But before we get into that review, I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to go into the weeds, so to speak, so just kind of buckle up and bear with me. I think, and there's going to be some reasons. Number one, Hideyuki Kikuchi, the guy that wrote these books. He was writing dark and dastardly shit well before a lot of these other guys, and I didn't really kind of understand this. And maybe one of the main reasons is probably the same reason for a lot of you. When we think of Vampire Hunter D, we probably think of the anime, or even possibly the PlayStation video game. And you wouldn't be blamed if you thought of the manga or the comic. But one of the last things that we think of as Vampire Hunter D fans is the actual source material, the books. And now diving into some of these books, I was really blown away because of the themes, the just kind of the darkness that surrounds these stories, and then the timeline in which they were released. Now, granted, you know, Hideyuki Kikuchi is not an American author. You know, he's coming out of Japan, so maybe that had something to do. You know, obviously, a lot of these stories weren't even translated until like the early 2000s. So that could definitely have some explanation to do with it. But the thing is, guys, I was just so blown away that he was writing stuff that was dark and dastardly well before the people that we kind of promote as the dark and dastardly. And I'll just... Vampire Hunter D came out before The Black Company. Vampire Hunter D came out before Berserk. It came out before The Witcher. It came out before a lot of these goddamn things. In fact, the only ones that are really, you know, surpassing it as far in the timeline is like Moorcock, Carl Wagner, Stephen Donaldson, and those guys wrote books back in the fucking 60s, okay? So it is actually pretty impressive, and I'm actually kind of shocked that we're not screaming Hideyuki Kikuchi's name when we talk about, you know, grimdark authors or people that pushed the envelope and changed the landscape of writing, okay? And just to add to this, it's not just Vampire Hunter D that Hideyuki Kikuchi concocted, okay? He also wrote fucking Wicked City and Demon City Shinjuku, as well as others, but all of these things were adapted pretty close, like out the gate after being written and turned into animes. And we all know the animes, they are fucking dark and twisted. Some of the most dark and twisted anime out there. And it all came from this brilliant mind, and it was pinned, printed, and out there, and we just never really talked about it. But guess what? I'm gonna start fucking talking about it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure you're probably tired already of listening to this old bastard talk a bunch of random shit. Just get to the book, dummy. Okay. Let's get into it. So, boom, Vampire Hunter D by Hideyuki Kikuchi. It really is a basic plot, guys, but what is amazing about the story is the mystery that Hideyuki Kikuchi wraps his characters in, as well as his world, but then it's also in the information he's delivering. He's giving you mystery and history kind of at the same time, and it's a beautiful mixture, and it really makes things intriguing and makes you want to push forward and learn more about this world. The basic premise of the story is when we see a young woman get bit by a member of the nobility who are vampires here in this world, and then she goes out seeking help from a vampire hunter. In this world, there are many hunter classes, but the vampire hunters are on the top. They're the cream of the crop. Now, this young woman will cross paths with a vampire hunter, and this is where we get introduced to our main character, Vampire Hunter D. Now, what makes D so intriguing is that he is very mysterious, and he's also beautiful. I'm just joking because he really rams the fact home that this dude is beautiful. Anyway, we come to find out really quickly that D is not like other vampire hunters. He is a badass just like the rest of them, but he's even more badass. And a lot of this has to do with his rate, like who he is. And this is not a spoiler because you get hit with it right out the gate, that D is not just a human. He's also a vampire. He's half and half, which is called a Dhampir. So he has their strengths and very little of their weaknesses, which makes him a fucking badass. Now from here, the story really does play out pretty straightforward. There are some little things that kind of hit you by surprise, but by all means, we're very much dealing with a vampire hunter who has been hired by a woman who will go out, do his investigations, deal with the communities of humans as well as with the nobility, kind of have to persevere, overcome, and try to protect this woman from one of the worst threats that lives on the frontier. I shouldn't say live, because they're fucking vampires. Okay, so first thing I want to jump into really is going to be the cons of this book, because it's going to be really easy to see my face and see that I love it, I'm into it, I'm excited, yeah. But there are plenty of things going on here in this book that might deter people, or I just want to at least be honest with you before I'm just like shouting about how awesome they are and you go out and read them, you're like, well, what the fuck, Mark? So, number one thing that's going to be the most obvious is that translation, okay? These books were written back in the 80s. They weren't fucking translated until the 2000s from Japanese to English, which makes them very clunky at times. And that doesn't mean from beginning to end, because there are certainly parts in here where the prose is powerful and it really hits in the right way and it really sets the tone and the mood of the story, and it's just good. But then there are also parts where it's so goddamn clunky and awkward that it can even make it confusing. You're like, what the fuck is exactly going on right now? It's just not, the connections are not hitting. You're not making them because of this clunkiness, okay? Now, like I said, that's not from beginning to end. There just will be clunky parts. You'll be smooth sailing and then all of a sudden a fucking bumpy road. The next thing I want to talk about that's in these books that might deter other readers is really just the overall rapiness of the men, okay? I don't know what the fuck is going on in the future, but for some reason every guy got rape on his mind, okay? There is a lot of either rape or attempted rape or just rapey mentality happening with the men on the frontier. Now, that doesn't mean it's non-stop, but there is a lot. And that might piss some people off, or you just have no threshold for that subject. So I'm just going to tell you right now, be prepared to deal with some scumbags that have, perverted ideas on their mind. It's not done I don't think it's really done for shock value. Somebody might argue with me there. I think that back in the day, this was something that was used to create that darker tone within your worlds. Sure, you can all argue about how it's played out and it doesn't need to be there now, but we're talking about a book that was written back in the early 80s. The other thing I'll mention is something I've already mentioned, but it is a subjective con, but if you're a plot junkie, this might not be enough to, fill you up. It's a pretty straightforward story, and it's just not going to give you a million twists and turns and bring the moon down and all that. And I know I'm sounding kind of like a jerk right now, but it's okay if that's the kind of reader you are. That's why I'm bringing this up. You're not probably going to feel filled on this amount of plot, but it's also a light novel. You're talking about 250 pages. It's not about the plot necessarily. It's about Vampire Hunter D. It's about the relationships he makes along the way, trekking thousands of miles across this frontier. And that's really where the meat and potatoes is. Like, that's the stuff that you're going to enjoy. For all you guys out there that are still like, I might want to pick these up. The things you're going to love are going to be that world building, are going to be the mysteriousness that kind of surrounds our main character. As much as we know about D, there is twice as many things we don't know about D. And in the world, it just slowly gets revealed to you. Obviously, here in book 1, we're going to get the most exposition on the world. In fact, I think it's like we're pretty early in. We get like a straight up info dump that's done in a great way. I kind of forgot about direct exposition because we're always like, oh, exposition. We're trying to do all these crazy tricks and backflips to not do info dumps anymore. That honestly, reading a just straight up direct info dump was kind of refreshing and just nice and informative, and it made me feel like I had a good grasp on what had happened before I set out on this journey. God damn it, I love this book. And now, just like in an effort to really ram it home and like prove a point here, is just, I'm a huge fan of the goddamn anime. Like I said, and the book 1 is the same story. So I already knew the story, but there was different shit to get into. It's not exactly a mirror image of one another, but god damn it, I was just blown away with how much fun I had tromping through the world, getting to know the world, getting to know the lore, what happened, the history. I just fucking loved it. And when I got into the next books, which we're not reviewing, but I'm just saying that's how it kept going. Each book, it wasn't necessarily about the plot. It was just about unraveling the mystery. Who is this beautiful, charismatic hunter, Vampire Hunter D, and how he, like, his relationships with the people spread out across the frontier, but then also just how this frontier took this specific shape. And I guarantee you, for people that are like really into like the Broken Empire, shit like that style world building, you're gonna fucking love this. So as far as my 2 cents for the slow and the struggling, I am at a weird little place here, right? I do think that these books are for you, absolutely. Because they're a short page count, they're very entertaining and engaging, and they just, you'll be able to pick them up and put them down. But they are translated works, so there is some clunkiness there that could definitely pose some problems. Maybe a little hurdle that'll be hard to jump over. But at the same time, I also want to say, the less amount of fucking reading experience that you have, most likely the more like smooth this ride will feel. And what I'm saying here is if you're somebody that's not used to reading a whole lot and you're not used to the style of words being put together in a buttery smooth way, like if you're not used to reading all the time and understanding flowery prose, then what the fuck, how would you even understand clunky prose? So these clunky parts might not even feel fucking clunky. So that's what I'm saying. Yes, they're clunky, but if you're an inexperienced reader, you might not even notice that shit. And even if you do, I don't think there's anything in here that's so goddamn tough to get over that you won't be able to finish the goddamn book, all right? I know I'm all over the place, but what I'm saying is, guys, I think that these could be for you. Well, as always, guys, thanks for spending some time down here at the channel. And to Hideyuki Kikuchi, agadash, god damn it, a million of these things, man. I'm so excited to be jumping into the actual source material for once, to be taking something I love and digging deeper into it. God damn, I'm excited. And if you guys are excited, guess what? I'm going to be covering all of these translated works. So far, I believe there's 30 books that have been translated, and I'm going to do them all. Now, I'm not going to be reviewing them all spoiler-free. What I have decided is because this world, the frontier, is so intriguing, and how we get little bits of information through each book, I think how I'm going to kind of cover these is by doing lore videos. Each book, I'll do a video about the lore, the history, and just the ins and outs of what we're learning, and each video will slowly be compiling all this Vampire Hunter D data, because shit, man, that's what nerds do. I'm gonna crunch some fucking Vampire Hunter D numbers until I fucking get sick of it, I guess. I don't know, probably won't ever. Anyway, if you're still watching, that's impressive. That's impressive, because this one has been unhinged, baby. Should have been some structure, you know, but there's not. There's no fucking structure, god damn it. Ugh. You guys got any more of that structure? Peace.